people that would watch this video, right, of him talking about like Steve Cook being on like TRT, even if you are or you aren't, I know you came out and talked about some stuff.
Yeah.
But
I've tried those peptides. Is it tesamorelin or ibutamoren?
This one was ipamorelin.
Okay. Yeah.
CJC.
Yep.
Combined together. But it's like, it's like bodybuilding. You want to test it in that thing. Like, it's not cheating. So why do people think it's bad? If it comes out, oh yeah, I used performance enhancing drugs. Like, I didn't cheat anyone. It's like, it's.
I think we're moving into a new space where it's like when I first came into the fitness industry, it's like the natty or not conversation was crazy. But now with peptides, there's so many things out there like that are is this natty or not? I think it's more importantly like if you're not competing, if like it's different if you're in pro sports and you're like I'm not on anything, but you are. If you're a CrossFitter and it's like no, I don't take things, and then you do, yes. Yeah. And I think that's where it's like I competed in natural bodybuilding where it was polygraphed and urinalysis for so long. The reason I stopped competing is like, okay, I don't want to take the things that I need to take in order to compete on that level. And I think that it was one of those things that...
But you said you were in natural bodybuilding.
Not men's physique. Right. This was beforehand in natural bodybuilding. And all of a sudden it just became like, again, in that world, in the Olympia world, the girls are on things.
Everyone
is.
How
it's
can
just
you
like
compete?
It's just one of those things. It's if you're going to be at that level. So it's like a personal decision. I never, I think for most people, like I even look back at the Mark McGwire, Sammy Sosa in the Major League Baseball days. It's such a hard thing because we as a society, that was when baseball was most fun. Is when people were seeing 60 to 70 home runs hit a year that were out of the ballpark.
Yeah.
You're telling me Major League Baseball didn't like that?
Yeah.
But it was like, okay, this is bad, but it's good. Same
bad. Keep going.
Right. Same thing. And like in the NFL, I think a lot of times, like anytime you have massive amounts of money on the line for things, you have people that, you have a poor kid from the inner cities or, some, farmer kid that is going to have to go work on the farm or be in the inner cities, or they're going to make millions of dollars. And like you said, those things work. That your ankle, it worked. Like we know they work. You're going to tell a 21-year-old kid, if you do that, it has to be a personal decision. Now, again, when we start talking about massive amounts of money, it's difficult because you're always going to get people that are going to be like, okay, the risk outweighs, or what could be outweighs the risk of it all. And that's why for me, it's like, no problem if someone wants to do that. I'm like, hey, at the end of the day, like, what are you doing? Are you in a federation? Are you saying you're natural or not? So
yeah, but I feel like it's a personal decision. But I guess I'm making the point now that it's not necessarily, and please, for God's sake, I'm not a doctor, but I don't think it's as much as a safety issue as people think anymore, right?
I agree with that.
Like people thought, okay, as soon as I cross this line, I'm like jeopardizing my long-term health. And I'm like, it's been long enough now. Yes, there are certain drugs, and black market is like definitely the entire black market, right?
Yes.
But if it's prescribed by a doctor now, which is pretty easy to do, and it's regulated and it's safe and it's from a legitimate pharmacy, like I don't think it's an issue of safety anymore. I think it's actually an issue of like how much can you enhance yourself,
right?
You can go wrong with a doctor though, right? There's
you
good
can,
and there's
you
bad
can,
doctors.
but like there's enough info out there and there's enough doctors out there now. It's just like you kind of know when it's like, wow, that sounds really cowboy. Like I think you should still do some of your own research going into that stuff with resources like Derek. So it's like if a doctor prescribes a certain amount, you're like, whoa, hold on. He just said in a video that is like a fucking crazy amount. This is like the wrong doctor. So like maybe an ex or get a referral, right? Speak to someone who's used someone good and that they trust and they're not dead. And they look great. Well, not dead is probably a bad market to judge by, but their life is better, right?
But that being said too, is like how much of our lives are we like men's testosterone is on the decrease just because of plastics or the hormones in chicken.
Not sleeping.
Yeah, exactly. Like we live in a different world now where our natural GH or our natural testosterone is lower in a lot of ways. So if it is like biohacking, there's a difference. What you're talking about is more biohacking to me. I think the guy that is the recreational guy who's abusing steroids, getting it on the black market, hey, like if you can look at yourself at the end of the day and stand at that person in the mirror and be like, okay, I feel good about this, kudos to you. And that's a personal choice. Like we can't judge other people on that, but I think that's where it comes down to is like if you're the health markers are a great indicator of that. If you care about health and you're doing blood work and everything like that, I definitely think what you're talking about, the biohacking, is where we're going with that is just crazy right now.
Well, yeah, I think although I agree with that term, I don't like it because I think it makes people feel like I don't want to do that. But I'm
Yeah.
like, I agree it is biohacking, but I'm also like, well, if you did this, your quality of life would be better. You know?
Yeah.
Like Joe Rogan, I think, has been responsible for that with two things. Cannabis, obviously, firstly,
Yeah.
but also stem cells. Like
Yeah.
these are two basically fringe biohacking medicines in some way. If you think about cannabis from like a health perspective,
Right.
like using it for treating illnesses or treating inflammation or chronic disease or whatever, like it was fringe right back then. But I think he's been responsible for a big push into like making that stuff more mainstream to talk about, right? And it's why I think the speed of the recreational industry and the medicinal industry have like really sped up. Like I don't know if you know now, but you can get a medicinal license how it was in America or whatever 10 years ago, where it was just like I'm a little bit anxious in the mornings. They're like, done, prescript.
Yeah.
It's that now in Australia. They've got that now.
And here's I'm more of a kind of like I would say Joe Rogan politically, being more independent. Like I want less. I don't want government telling me every little thing I have to do all the time. Like I kind of like being as long as you're not infringing on someone else. Like your body, your choice type of a thing. Yeah, it's kind of like, you know, if a person feels good about the decisions they're making with what they're putting in their body, it's like telling someone they can't eat organic or telling someone they can't get a certain plastic surgery. I mean, I think that's kind of what we're realizing with a lot of the stuff with guys, whether it comes to, you know, hormones, whether it comes to peptides, it's kind of like the male version of plastic surgery for a lot of guys out there. And even better in some cases, like on one side of the spectrum it's all about health, on the other side of the spectrum it's all about aesthetics. That's a, you know, that there's a lot of in between on that, to where it's like, okay, like you can optimize your health and you'll feel better, which will then help you look better. And so it's kind of like this cycle that you can get in.
What would be your ideal if you could just like set the rules for Australia? Would it be you just go to the doctor and they say, you obviously don't need this because you're fine.
Right.
But if you do want to get more muscular, here's the downsides and we'll prescribe it if you want to prescribe
Well, and that's the hard thing though, is like, because I think you'll find a doctor that says you don't need this or you could benefit from
I'm
this.
saying you don't need it. Like you're okay. You're not, there's no illness here. This is just purely like you just
Would
want
you
to
say
enjoy your
enhancing
training
your life,
more. You're
optimizing
enhancing.
your life?
Yeah, if you say like I want to be optimal, because like, you know, when it is one of
But when
those.
you say optimal, you mean like more jacked is what you actually are saying.
Yes and no. It's like, but
like
if
energy,
yeah, it is
recovery-
one of those things. Like when you hit a certain level, with age and everything else, and you're traveling.
How old are you
and
now, Steve?
I'm 37, so it
Yeah,
is like one of those things, especially with traveling. Circadian rhythms play a massive role in just about every aspect of life, and so for me, it's like I don't want to take a bunch of like I don't need to be jacked and huge anymore, but I want to be able to sleep better at night. I don't want to be irritable. If you're telling me that testosterone can help me out with that, or a peptide that can help me out with that, like I want to listen to that because I want to be the best version of myself. Again, I don't want, like, you know, for me, I obviously made the decision that it wasn't worth being jacked on that level, so I stopped competing because I was like, yeah,
Thank God.
I don't think it's going to be healthy for me, because there's always that just a little bit more, just a little bit more. I'll be happy when. And so many competitors do that, and I think that's just people in life. I'll be happy when I reach this milestone, when I make this much money. You never are. If you're not happy right now, you're never going to be happy when you hit those things.
And the risks just go up exponentially.
Yeah, I mean I think we're seeing a lot of bodybuilders right now that have died during COVID. Obviously, you know, it's like you can't say it's because of this or because of that, but I do think that you know, clearly when you start taking copious amounts of things, your health risks go up.
And that amount of muscle mass as well.
That yeah, it's true. It's true.
But you would put a level at way below competing, much more in just like the recreational bodybuilder that you think is like 100% safe.
No. I'm not saying that either. Like I'm not a doctor, so I can't say what's safe and what isn't. What I'm saying is when you look at blood work, like we did this every day on set of The Biggest Loser, like, or not every week, people did blood work. And if you're borderline diabetic, you take XYZ for it to help with that, or when we make sure the diet is you're eating certain, you know, we're not going to be super high on our fat right now because your triglyceride levels are insane, and so I think that there's things that you can do, whether you're if your testosterone's super low and and you're an old enough person that you're not going to get that back, or if you're on a peptide and you're talking to your doctor, I think those are things that if it's a reasonable, like, hey, the risk versus reward, like you taking those peptides with your ankle, like you're not going to do that for the rest of your life. So I think that
I feel pretty good, so maybe I will.
But I do think, like, obviously receptors too. It's like you know, we talk about downgrade and upgrade of those receptors in our brain and in our body, and all of a sudden you can, you know, just like any drug, I think that, you know, not necessarily with peptides, but you can always kind of burn out and need more and more and more and more. And I think that obviously with testosterone, that can definitely be something that's like, you know, you have a little bit.
It's a crutch.
Yeah. And then when you do get off of it, you don't feel the same way.
Yeah. Man, I think it's just a combination of like, I think about it a lot, and I'm a big realist about this, like seeing a lot of people and working a lot of people at our gyms and stuff. And obviously a lot of our clients are very, very wealthy. And I realize, like, there's always sacrifice with whatever you do. And I think a lot of the time it just eats into your health. And what I mean by that is, like, if you were prioritizing health and optimizing for health, which obviously we love to say we do, the truth is it's probably not our number one priority. Our number one priority is probably like either our family or our business, right? Yeah. And so there is some sacrifice because you're like, no, I want to like push myself a little bit harder in this, like, you know, stay up late, do these extra calls, like send these extra emails, open this extra business, whatever, push a little bit there. That really is the priority because, you know, okay, I'm going to miss a little bit of sleep here. Probably not going to get this meal in. Might forget a bit of water. I'm not saying that's like, it'll be a drop in 5% for guys like us, like, but in people like our clients, it's an 80% drop. Right? They don't care at all about, because health is still really important to us. It's definitely not number one. It's still really important. We maintain it at a pretty high level, but we know what it's like to also have health as the number one priority. And it's like that level is like, you think about your ranges of testosterone and IGF-1, all that stuff. That's the peak of those levels because you're not sacrificing sleep. You're like taking all the supplements. You're doing all the routine. Like, you know, we know what it's like to have perfect lifestyle centered around health as being optimal and how you can feel. But because our priority is business, right? Well, I'm speaking for myself. It's business. Like, to close that gap, to get up in that range again, I realize it just can't come through lifestyle. It just can't, because where am I going to pull it from? Right. So for me, I'm like, okay, I could rehab my ankle faster potentially, but I have so much to do in a day. I'm like, I kind of just need this process to speed up and get it done. So for me, it like takes mid to low range stuff, and it just for periods of time boosts it up when I'm like, okay, I'm pushing myself a little bit here, probably sacrificing on sleep. I need more energy through this period. Cool. I can go up a little bit under the supervision of a doctor, enhance myself so I don't lose on that side, and I can kind of rev at a higher RPMs. But I know, okay, it's going to have to come down. Right. There's going to be a period. We're going to pull everything back. We're going to take a holiday. We're going to chill. We're not going to do any of this stuff, you know? And it's just like, I think if you can ebb and flow like that, ultimately, I think it's the best combination. I think it's the future. That's what people are doing now.
I do think that because it's just not black and white anymore. And I think that even with COVID, I've seen that, like, who really is making decisions? Like, because we think black and white, like this is right, this is wrong. Like, if caffeine was illegal as a substance enhancer, would we think, oh, that person's on caffeine, that's wrong?
It'd still be sitting in a cave.
Right. Like, what I'm saying is like throughout, we always are kind of going to ebb and flow with things. And like in the early 2000s, it was, you know, whatever McGuire and all those guys were taking to hit those home runs. It wasn't steroids. It was pro hormones. It was just, you know, genetically altered a little bit. So I'm saying, like, we're always going to have things that are, you know, there's always going to be those gray areas. And I think ultimately it's like, okay, is this about health? Is it not about health? Like, are you planning to doing this forever? Are you doing it with a doctor's supervision? There's so many things out there that you need to ask yourself. And that's why at the end of the day, if you can look at yourself in the mirror and be like, okay, yes, this is making me a better person in all aspects, not just in this area that I really want to improve in right now. Like, you know, is it worth it to me?